It started with a photo. Not the kind you expect, no selfies, no incriminating positions, no lipstick-stained collars. Just a stupid photo of 4 of us framed on the kitchen counter. It had been there for over a year, me, my fiancé, her sister, and her sister's husband. All of us in fake laugh mode during a beach trip in Santa Barbara, sun in our eyes, a moment manufactured purely for show. That day, I'd come home early from work, my boss had a family emergency and sent us all home mid-afternoon. The house was quiet, unnervingly quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I wandered into the kitchen and for some reason, my eyes landed on that photo. I picked it up, not knowing why. That's when I noticed the smallest detail. Melissa, my fiancé's sister, was wearing a bracelet I'd never seen before. Gold with a small emerald charm. Familiar. It was the same bracelet I saw my fiancé hiding in her drawer last month, half wrapped in a silk cloth like a secret. She told me it was an old gift from college, shrugged it off, and kissed me like I was just another thought she needed to swat away. I didn't push it back then. I do now. I stood there staring at that frame, at that green glint, and something in my gut shifted. A tightness crawled up my chest. I put the photo down and walked straight to her bedroom. She wasn't home. Her gym bag was gone, but she hadn't gone to the gym. I knew because I checked the app we both used. She'd turned off location sharing 3 days ago, claiming it was draining her battery. I didn't wait. I called Melissa. No answer. Called again. No answer. Third time pickup, but it wasn't Melissa's voice. It was Tyler. He sounded startled. Like I had caught him stepping out of someone else's dream. Or guilt. Hey, man. She's in the shower. Can I help you with something? My mouth opened but nothing came out for a moment. It wasn't just the words. It was the background. I recognized the acoustic echo. That wasn't Melissa's apartment. That was a hotel room. A hotel room I knew because my fiancé and I had stayed there once, back when we used to actually touch each other without guilt hanging off our fingers. I said the only thing I could think of. Put her on the phone. He hesitated. She's in the shower, dude. What's a? I said put her on. And then I heard it. A voice. Muffled. But unmistakable. My fiancé. Laughing. Laughing like she had just won something. And that's when Tyler whispered something he didn't realize I'd hear. Something not meant for me. She's gonna kill me for answering. Kill him? For answering? I hung up. And drove. I don't even remember putting on my shoes. I remember the way the steering wheel felt, slippery and cold. I remember the hotel's parking lot, the exact layout of the 3rd floor, the hallway that smelled like cheap perfume and citrus-scented cleaner. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I waited. And they opened the door. Tyler opened the door shirtless. Melissa was behind him, her hair wet, wrapped in a towel that wasn't hers. She looked at me like I was interrupting something sacred. But it wasn't anger or embarrassment. It was something else entirely. Disgust. Like I was late to a meeting they both hoped I'd miss. And my fiancé? She was behind them, fully dressed, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Cool as glass. She didn't even blink. Just said, well, that was faster than we thought. No panic. No apology. Not even surprise. I looked at all 3 of them and the silence between us was so heavy it felt like a 4th person in the room. Tyler tried to speak first. Listen, man, But my fiancé interrupted him, turning to me. You weren't supposed to find out like this. She said it like she was telling me I'd forgotten to pick up milk. And that was the first time I realized this wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't a moment of passion or a drunken mistake. This was choreography. Rehearsed. Scripted. Played out over weeks, maybe months. I said nothing. I turned around and left. I walked down that hallway and all I could think was this wasn't about love. This was about power. And I was the only one who didn't know I'd been playing a game. I didn't go home. I didn't call anyone. I drove until the city lights became dust and the skyline disappeared into the windshield like a bad idea you try to forget. Ended up in a parking lot behind an abandoned gas station, just sitting there, staring at the cracked screen of my phone. It was still open on the call log. Melissa. Tyler. Her. All 3 of them, characters in a story I never agreed to be part of. The moment kept replaying in my head, that hotel room door swinging open like a stage curtain. 3 people standing there like actors, like they'd just finished their final scene and were waiting for applause. My fiancé hadn't even looked ashamed. Melissa didn't flinch. And Tyler. Tyler looked like a man who had been caught mid-confession and decided he liked the taste of honesty too much to stop. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the car watching the sky shift colors. When I finally made it back to our place the next morning, everything looked the same, which somehow made it worse. Her shoes still by the door. Her coffee mug still on the counter. She hadn't come home. But she hadn't packed either. I showered, got dressed, and went to see my sister. I hadn't told her anything yet, but the moment she opened the door, her face cracked. She knew something had happened. She always did. We used to joke that she could smell lies before they even made a sound. But this time she didn't need to, because when I walked into her kitchen, her husband, Mark, was sitting there with his hands folded like he was praying. But it wasn't guilt on his face. It was pain. He stood up before I could speak, said one sentence that shattered the floor under me. "I've been in love with your fiancé since before I married your sister." That sentence. I swear I heard glass break. Except there was no glass. Just silence. Thick and raw. My sister stood frozen, staring at him like he had just spoken in a language only demons understood. Mark went on. He said he met my fiancé years ago, long before any of us got serious. Said he thought it was just a crush at first. Said he figured it would go away. But it didn't. Even when she got with me. Even when he married my sister. He said he tried to bury it, to focus on the life he chose, but every time we had a family dinner, every time she smiled across the table, it came back. And he couldn't stand it anymore. Then came the real blow. "She's been texting me for months," he said. "Flirting. Suggesting things. Nothing physical. But it was more than harmless." My sister was crying now. But not loudly. The kind of crying that happens when a person realizes they're living someone else's story, one where they're just the placeholder. She turned to me, her voice thin as paper. "She's breaking everything." Then she said something I still haven't wrapped my head around. "You need to leave her. Move with me. Across the country. I want to keep an eye on them. I don't trust her. Not around my husband." My mouth actually dropped open. "Wait, you want me to move because you don't trust her with your husband?" "She gets into people's heads," she said. "She broke you. She's breaking me now. She's poison. If I stay here, she'll take him. If you stay with her, she'll destroy you completely. We have to leave. We have to end her reach." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My brain was full of pieces I couldn't fit together. My fiancé and Tyler. My fiancé and Mark. My sister asking me to uproot my life to help her babysit her husband's impulses. And beneath all that, a question I didn't want to say out loud. What kind of person have I been loving all these years? That night, I went home again. She was there, sitting on the couch like nothing happened, scrolling her phone, drinking wine. She didn't say a word when I walked in. Didn't explain. Didn't ask where I'd been. She just looked up at me, calm as still water, and said, "Are we done playing pretend yet?" And that's when I realized. She never wanted love. She wanted control. And I'd been the fool who kept handing it to her like a gift. I didn't answer her question. I walked past her, past the living room, past the history wrapped in photo frames and ticket stubs on the walls. I went to our bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the floor. Not the bed. The floor. There's something about hard surfaces that forces reality to settle in faster. I must have stayed there for an hour, maybe more. Not crying. Not thinking. Just existing. Like the kind of silence that comes after a bomb has gone off but before the dust settles. When I came out, she hadn't moved. Still curled on the couch, legs folded under her, scrolling. Watching me from behind the glow of her screen like I was a stranger who'd entered her life by mistake. "You know," she said casually, "Tyler asked me if I regret anything." I didn't speak. I told him the only thing I regret is wasting so much time pretending you were the one. I felt it like a slap. Not because of the words, but because she meant them. Fully. Purely. Like cruelty had become a language she was fluent in. "I gave you everything," I said. She laughed, actually laughed. "You gave me a 2-bedroom apartment and a guy who thinks loyalty is enough. That's not everything. That's convenience." I took a step forward. My hands were shaking, not from rage but disbelief. "So what was all this? Some long audition? You just trying out normal life until someone more interesting came along?" She leaned her head back against the couch board. "You were always the backup plan. You were the guy I could fall back on while I figured out what I really wanted." "And what's that?" "Options," she said, smiling now. "I like having people want me. I like knowing I can ruin a room just by walking into it." I wanted to scream. Break something. But I didn't. I just stood there, absorbing the wreckage. Then she dropped the real nuke. "Melissa knew. For months. She just didn't tell you because she didn't want to be the one to break you." That spun me. My mind flipped through every conversation I'd had with Melissa recently. The weird pauses. The careful words. The pitying glances. She knew. She'd known and said nothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Melissa. Like she'd felt me thinking about her. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to hear what she had to say, but because I already knew. She was trying to keep her world from shattering by managing mine. Damage control. Delayed impact. The next day I packed a bag. Not all my stuff. Just enough. I didn't even tell her I was leaving. I knew she wouldn't ask where I was going. That's how far gone things were. She didn't care if I stayed or left, only if she could still control the outcome. I drove to a cheap rental on the edge of town. No furniture, no heat. Just 4 walls and the quiet I needed. But peace didn't come. Mark showed up 2 days later. No warning. Just knocked on the door and stood there with a look like someone who hadn't slept in a week. I left her, he said. Told her the truth. Everything. I stared at him. Why are you here? Because I had to see what it felt like. Choosing the truth for once. I let him in. We didn't talk much. Just sat. And that silence between us? It was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with two men realizing they'd both been circling the same flame and getting burned in different ways. Then Mark said something I'll never forget. She never wanted either of us. She just wanted to see how far we'd go to keep her. And that's when I realized the truth. I had never been in love with her. I had been in love with the idea of being chosen. 3 days passed before Melissa came to see me. She didn't knock like Mark did. She barged in, pale and frantic like someone running from a fire only they could see. Her coat was half-buttoned, her hair unbrushed, eyes glassy. You need to come back, she said. No greeting. No apology. Just that. I looked at her. To what, exactly? To your life. To your role. You can't just walk out and leave everything for her to keep. I stared. You sound like this is a business deal. She ignored me, pacing the room. She's spinning stories. Telling people you had a breakdown. That you've gone off the rails. She's painting you as some obsessive control freak. She's rewriting the whole narrative and making herself the victim. And you want me to what? Defend myself? Argue with her lies? She's good at it, Melissa said quietly. Too good. I laughed, bitter and flat. You knew. You watched her do this. You enabled it. She froze. That's not fair. You helped her keep secrets. You protected her instead of warning me. I was scared, she whispered. Of what? Melissa looked at me with a kind of guilt I hadn't seen before. Real guilt? Not the manufactured kind people wear when they get caught, but the kind that eats through their ribs. I was scared she'd turn on me. And there it was. The real heart of it. My fiancé hadn't just manipulated relationships, she owned them. She collected loyalty like currency, spent it only when it bought her more power. Melissa had been a pawn too. She just convinced herself she was a bystander. I turned away from her, suddenly tired. It's too late. No, it's not, she said. Because I haven't told you everything. She pulled out her phone and opened a voice memo. Pressed play. And suddenly my fiancé's voice filled the room. Her voice, low and slithering. Tyler would leave Melissa tomorrow if I snapped my fingers. Mark? I could get him back on his knees in under a week. And as for him, I heard my name, spoken like an insult. He'll cling to whatever scraps I give him because he thinks pain means passion. He's so easy to control, it's almost boring now. I felt like I'd been slapped with fire. Melissa paused the recording. Her hands were shaking now. She said that after you left, Tyler sent it to me by accident. I think she meant to send it to someone else. Probably one of her friends. I was stunned into silence. That audio wasn't just betrayal. It was confirmation. Weaponized. Cruel. A surgical takedown of everything I thought I had been to her. She's turning people against you, Melissa added. She's going to destroy your reputation. Quietly. Socially. You need to hit first. And how do I do that? She looked me dead in the eye. You take everything she cares about and burn it down before she lights the match. For a moment, I thought Melissa was being dramatic. But then she showed me the messages. Screenshots of conversations between my fiancé and her friends, between her and Tyler, between her and Mark. She'd been playing all of them. Whispering different versions of the truth into each ear. Shaping them all like clay. And somehow they all wanted her approval more than they wanted honesty. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I called a lawyer. I wasn't married to her yet, but we had co-signed on a condo. I had evidence now, the voice memo, the messages, enough to challenge her if she tried to smear me legally or socially. And then around midnight, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I posted online. No names. No details. Just the facts. I found out my fiancé has been emotionally manipulating me, my sister, her husband, and others for months. She pits people against each other for control. I'm done letting her narrate this story. The truth matters. Watch carefully when someone starts rewriting their past, they're usually trying to erase you from it. The post went viral overnight. People started digging. Talking. The real stories bubbled up. She had a pattern. A past. Suddenly she wasn't untouchable anymore. And for the first time I felt something close to freedom. The next morning everything felt sharper. Like the world had shifted slightly in my favor, not much, but just enough for the truth to start cracking the surface. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, mentions, shares. People from college, old coworkers, even mutual acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, all saying some version of the same thing. I thought it was just me. Turns out she had been running the same game on more people than I could count. Making them feel special, then disposable. Building them up with charm, then isolating them with well-placed doubt. It was a cycle. A strategy. And I had been one of many to fall into it. But now, the spotlight had shifted. Melissa texted me, she's spiraling. Apparently, she'd found the post. And not just found it, she'd started damage control immediately. Posting vague messages about emotional abuse, crafting a narrative where she was the one who had been gaslit for years by someone who couldn't handle boundaries. Classic move. Smear first, then cry victim. It might have worked, too, if people hadn't started responding with their own stories. Stories that matched mine. Screenshots. Voicemails. Little details too specific to be lies. By midday, her illusion of control was full of holes. That afternoon, Mark called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. She showed up at my job, he said without preamble. Tried to make a scene. Told my boss I was unstable. That I was stalking her. My jaw clenched. Did he believe her? No. He called security. Pause. She's unraveling, man. You need to be careful. She's not used to being challenged. Then came the most unexpected part of the day. Tyler called. I hadn't spoken to him since the hotel. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe an apology, maybe denial. But what I got was something else entirely. I need to talk to you, he said. In person. I met him at a diner outside the city. Neutral ground. Public. He looked worse than I remembered, thinner, jittery, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. She's blackmailing me, he said, hands wrapped tight around a coffee cup. With what? He pulled out his phone. Showed me a series of messages. Screenshots of things he'd sent her. Some of them just flirty. Some worse. Not illegal, but enough to ruin his reputation. His marriage. His career. She said if I don't stay quiet, she'll release these. She told me to handle Melissa or she'd handle her for me. That stopped me cold. She threatened your wife? She didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about lust. This was warfare. A personal chess game where people were just pieces to be moved, sacrificed, or destroyed. And right now, she was cornered. Which made her dangerous. I want out, Tyler said. Tell me what to do. It was surreal, sitting across from the guy who helped wreck my life, now asking me for a way to fix his. But I could see the truth in him now, not a villain. Just another victim. Another idiot who thought he could handle her and walked into a hurricane with a matchstick. We go public, I said. All of us. Full story. No names. But enough to make sure she can't twist the narrative anymore. You think people will believe it? They already do. And that's when Tyler did something I didn't expect. He handed me his phone. Use whatever you need. He left. I stayed. Ordered another coffee. Sat there for a long time thinking about everything, about how close I'd come to marrying her, about how deep the poison had gone. She'd infected families, friendships, entire lives. And all of us had let her. Until now. That night, I made a second post. This one was longer. It didn't name her, but it laid everything out, the manipulation, the triangulation, the emotional blackmail. I added Tyler's screenshots, the audio Melissa had sent me, carefully redacted. And then I ended it with the sentence I knew would cut deepest. She told someone once that I was easy to control. She was wrong. I was easy to love. And that was her real problem. Within hours, it exploded. She didn't post again after that. The silence that followed my second post was deafening, not just from her, but from the people who used to orbit her like she was gravity itself. The likes, the comments, the shared stories had stopped being whispers and turned into a chorus. People weren't just reacting anymore, they were connecting. Comparing timelines. Noticing overlaps. Everyone who had ever felt the slow burn of her manipulation was stepping out of the shadows. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was exposure. And when someone like her loses her mask, she doesn't just disappear, she starts to scramble. Melissa called the next morning. She sounded off. Tired, scattered. She'd barely slept. She's been showing up places. Just appearing. At my gym. At the coffee place near my job. Last night she parked outside our apartment and just sat there. Did you call the police? They won't do anything. She's not threatening me. Not directly. I knew that move. She was trying to unsettle Melissa. Not to punish, to re-establish control. That was her currency. And we were bankrupting her. That afternoon I finally received a message from her. A single text. You don't know the full story. No apology. No explanation. Just the same cryptic arrogance that once made me doubt myself. But not anymore. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, she emailed me. Long, calculated, curated like an audition tape. Pages of half-truths and reframed memories. She blamed the pressure. Said her behavior was a result of attachment wounds. Said I had misunderstood her. That I had taken private moments and broadcast them for sympathy. Then the real message slipped in. You should consider deleting what you've posted. It's not helping anyone. Let's move forward with peace. Not I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. Just a warning dressed up as a white flag. She wanted the storm to stop because she was starting to feel the flood. And then she made a mistake. She reached out to my mother, told her I was unstable, that I had a vendetta, that I was publicly defaming someone out of heartbreak. She spoke to my mother like they were still friends, like the years of dinners and gifts and fake charm gave her a permanent pass into our lives. What she didn't realize, my mother already knew. She'd seen the posts, read the comments, even reached out to Melissa quietly. She never said anything directly to me, not until that moment. But when I called her, shaking with disbelief that my ex-fiancé had tried to recruit her for damage control, my mom only said, "She's scared, sweetheart. And scared people claw." She paused. "You're doing the right thing. Keep going." That hit me harder than I expected. Because for the first time in months, I felt grounded. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about reclaiming the space she had occupied inside all of us, in our families, in our trust, in our silence. Tyler sent me another voice memo that night. This one was from weeks ago, a call she didn't know he had recorded. In it, she's laughing, telling someone that even if things go south, I always land on my feet. People forget fast. All you have to do is make the truth seem messy enough. That line stayed with me. Make the truth seem messy enough. It was her entire method. Discredit the storyteller. Complicate the facts. Misdirect until everyone throws their hands up and walks away. Not this time. By the end of the week, 3 more people had reached out, all with similar stories. All with fragments that fit the larger picture. And then something happened I didn't see coming. Melissa showed up at my rental with a small box. "I'm done hiding," she said, handing it to me. "She left this at my place last year. I never opened it." Inside were letters, photos, a burner phone. The letters were drafts. Some were love letters to Tyler. Some were rage-fueled rants about Mark. Others were about me, lists of grievances, twisted memories rewritten to paint me as obsessive, controlling, emotionally stunted. Not one sentence acknowledged her own actions. It was like reading the diary of someone watching her life through a mirror, only ever seeing reflections of blame. The phone was worse. Messages to men I didn't recognize. Photos. Voice notes. She'd been running a dozen stories at once. Dozens of lives. We weren't even the full picture. We were chapters. And this? This was her collection. Her trophies. We took the box to the lawyer. It was no longer a matter of personal heartbreak. This was premeditated, patterned, documented, and finally undeniably exposed. The lawyer didn't say much when he opened the box. He didn't have to. The contents spoke for themselves. He spent an hour going through the phone, cataloging every message, noting the dates, matching them to the timeline I'd already laid out. Every entry painted the same image. She wasn't chaotic, she was calculated. Everything was a tool to manipulate or deflect. Even her vulnerability had timestamps. "This changes the conversation," he said finally. "It's not about personal grievances anymore. She's left behind a trail of documented emotional coercion. And if she pushes legal threats or public defamation, we respond with this." It was strange holding that much evidence in a single small box. It felt like her entire performance had been captured and bound, like someone had filmed a magician's tricks from behind the curtain. But even with all that in hand, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Like I could finally see how far I'd let her twist my perception of reality. Melissa and I sat in silence in my living room afterward. She looked hollowed out, like the box had drained more than it revealed. She was planning to leave the country, she said suddenly. Tyler found emails. She was looking at jobs in Berlin, then Lisbon. She told a friend she was ready to start over without the deadweight. I think that meant all of us. I asked if Tyler was still talking to her. Melissa shook her head. "No. He's done. He moved into his brother's place and blocked her number. But she keeps trying. Emails, socials, fake accounts. And Mark." She hesitated. "We're still figuring it out. But we talk. We both feel like we've woken up from the same nightmare." The next day, I filed for full disassociation from every financial and legal tie to her, the condo, joint accounts, anything that linked us. The lawyer expedited it. Said this kind of calculated manipulation, if proven, could lead to a restraining order if necessary. Not because she was physically dangerous, but because she had become a threat to reputations, stability, mental health. That same evening, a journalist reached out. They'd seen the viral posts. Read the story. Wanted to feature it anonymously in a piece about emotional abuse and manipulation in modern relationships. I didn't want my name in it. Not yet. But I agreed. Because if even one person saw the signs early, the charming detachment, the manufactured chaos, the constant narrative shifting, then maybe it would stop someone else from becoming another page in her scrapbook. When the piece dropped, the ripple was immediate. Messages flooded in. One from a man in Seattle who had dated her 5 years ago. Same pattern. Another from a woman she'd called her best friend who she'd slowly turned against her own partner through subtle lies. A guy from her workplace fired last year after inappropriate behavior that now sounded suspiciously like manufactured sabotage. She hadn't just hurt people. She had erased them. Quietly. Systematically. Until now. Then came the final move. She showed up. Not at my place. But at my parents' house. I got the call from my mother, calm, measured, like she was walking through a thunderstorm and refusing to blink. She came here crying, my mom said. Said she wanted to apologize. That she'd made mistakes. That she still loved you. I didn't respond. She said she'd made everyone turn on her, that you'd weaponized the internet against her. That she was a victim of your need for revenge. I asked my mom what she said back. She took a breath. Then, steady as stone. I told her that love doesn't look like strategy. And grief doesn't look like control. Then I closed the door. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Not because everything was resolved, but because I wasn't waiting for another lie. I wasn't spinning in her orbit anymore. She was out there, somewhere, scrambling, shifting, trying to rebuild a narrative that no longer held. But her empire of illusions? It was crumbling. And she knew it. I didn't hear from her for almost 2 weeks after she visited my parents' house. And I thought maybe, just maybe, that was it. Maybe she had finally realized the game was over. That the mask had shattered too completely to ever be worn again. But people like her don't just walk away. They don't disappear. They adapt. They rebrand. The silence broke with a message. From a new number. You think you've won. But all you've done is expose yourself as a bitter coward. No one cares about your story anymore. It's already getting old. You'll fade faster than you think. It didn't even sound angry. It sounded strategic. As if she was already rehearsing her comeback, the next act where she casts herself as the misunderstood exile who was wronged by the very people she tried to love. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer. He added it to the growing file. The journalist who had written the piece reached out again. Told me their inbox had been flooded with readers asking if there would be a follow-up, people sharing their own experiences, asking for resources, wanting to understand how someone like her could exist in plain sight for so long. They asked if I wanted to contribute something more personal. A letter. A reflection. I spent 3 days writing it. I didn't name her. Didn't even mention myself directly. I wrote it for the next person, the one scrolling through their phone late at night, second-guessing their gut, trying to decide if the small emotional bruises they feel are real or imagined. I wrote, sometimes the worst people don't yell. They smile. They ask for nothing and make you feel like you owe them everything. They'll make you question the version of yourself that existed before they came. And by the time you see what's happening, they've already made you their alibi. That line ended up being the quote people shared the most. Tyler read it and called me. We hadn't spoken since the last meeting with the lawyer. You wrote that for her, he said. Not accusingly. Just acknowledging it. I wrote it for all of us. Melissa and Mark came by the next evening. They brought food, real food, homemade. For once, we didn't talk about her. Not directly. We talked about old memories. Before her. Before the fracture. That night, Melissa said something that stayed with me. She wanted to be unforgettable. But she made herself unmissable. I didn't answer. But she was right. Even now, even with the silence, she still lived at the edge of every conversation. Still haunted the pauses. That was her real victory, leaving scars you had to explain to people who never saw the blade. I stayed quiet online after that. I didn't need to post anymore. She'd lost her power the moment people stopped playing by her rules. And yet, every once in a while, I'd get a message from someone, a stranger who'd read the post or heard the story secondhand. Some were angry. Some confused. Most were just relieved. I thought I was crazy, they'd say. Thank you for showing me I wasn't. And with each one, it felt a little more like closure. Not perfect. Not clean. But real. It wasn't revenge. It was recovery. And it was mine. Spring came without warning. One day, the skies were still gray, the air sharp with winter's breath, and then suddenly the streets were noisy with life again. It was the first time in months I noticed how green the trees were, how people smiled in the street, how the world had kept turning while I had been frozen in her gravity. I ran into Tyler at the market. Not planned. Not awkward. He looked different, cleaner, calmer, lighter. He told me he was moving. Across the country. Starting fresh. He didn't mention her and I didn't ask. Before we parted, he said, "You did what I couldn't. You broke the spell." That phrase stuck with me. Because that's exactly what it had been, a spell. A slow enchantment of compliments, manipulation, and fear disguised as love. And when it broke, it didn't shatter with drama. It dissolved like mist burned away by sunlight. Melissa invited me to a family dinner the following week. It was small, just her, Mark, a couple of close friends. No mention of her. No analysis. Just laughter, wine, silence that didn't feel like tension. I sat next to Mark and caught a glimpse of their old dynamic, the way they moved around each other now with caution but effort. Real effort. I walked home that night and opened the box again. The one Melissa had given me. It was still tucked in the back of my closet, untouched since the lawyer copied everything he needed. I hadn't looked inside since. I went through it slowly this time. Each letter, each photo, each piece of digital evidence, no longer burning with betrayal but whispering lessons. I saw it differently now. Saw how calculated every word was. How familiar each life felt. And most importantly, I saw where I had ignored the signs. Where I had chosen comfort over confrontation. Where I had wanted her to be someone she never was. Near the bottom of the box, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a postcard. Blank on the front except for a black and white photo of Lisbon. On the back, a single line in her handwriting. The escape is always sweeter than the stay. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I missed her, but because I finally understood her. She never intended to build anything. She only ever intended to leave something behind, a mess, a memory, a wound someone else would clean up while she vanished into another life. She thrived on aftermath. On the silence after the storm. But this time, there was no silence. Only stories. Shared. Strengthened. Standing tall. I took the postcard and burned it in a bowl on my balcony. Watched the edges curl, the smoke rise, the ash settle like dust from an old book finally closed. I didn't need souvenirs. I didn't need reminders. She had wanted to be unforgettable, a name stitched into everyone's emotional timeline. But I was done remembering her on her terms. From now on, she would live only as a lesson. And I had finally learned it. It's been 6 months. Half a year since that night in the hotel hallway, since the frame on the kitchen counter started unraveling the world I thought I knew. People talk about betrayal like it's a dagger in the back, quick and brutal. But it's not. It's slower than that. It seeps. It builds. It unthreads you until you forget the shape you once had. But slowly, painfully, you begin to remember. She hasn't reached out again. I don't know if she left the country like she planned. I don't care. Let her start over. Let her rewrite herself somewhere far from anyone who knows what she did here. Let her pretend. But she doesn't get to rewrite my story. A few weeks ago, I got a message from someone new. A stranger. She'd just gotten out of a relationship that felt too familiar. Too much like mine. She said reading the posts gave her the words she didn't have. Said it helped her stop blaming herself. And that was the moment it all came full circle. Because I realized that what she took from me, the trust, the clarity, the sense of self, I had started rebuilding piece by piece. And somehow, in telling the truth, I'd helped someone else begin their own reconstruction. Not out of vengeance, but out of survival. I don't talk about her anymore. Not to my friends. Not to my family. Not even to myself. She's not a ghost, she's a closed door. The kind you walk past without thinking. Melissa and I still talk. Not often, but enough. She's healing in her own way. She and Mark are working through things, carefully, deliberately. It's not perfect, but it's real. Tyler? I haven't heard from him since he moved. I hope he's rebuilding too. As for me, I started seeing a therapist. I needed help making sense of how I'd let someone take so much from me without ever raising their voice. I needed to understand why I thought love had to be earned through suffering. I learned that real love doesn't twist you up inside. It doesn't leave you anxious or small. It doesn't manipulate or monitor or make you question your worth. Real love doesn't need an audience. I'm not looking for it right now. But when it comes, if it comes, I'll know how to recognize it. If you're reading this and you're where I was confused, ashamed, second-guessing everything, let me tell you something. You're not too sensitive. You're not too needy. You're not imagining it. If someone makes you feel small so they can feel big, that's not love. If they rewrite history to suit their version, that's not love. If they destroy your trust, then ask you to rebuild it alone, that's not love. You deserve better. I didn't think I could walk away from her. I thought she had all the power. But I was wrong. She only had what I kept giving her. And the day I stopped, the day I said no more, that's the day I got my life back. Let that be the ending. Not her. You.